There is something eerily sacred about the silence before the planchette moves. It is not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of thresholds, a silence that breathes, as if it were a veil between realms, trembling faintly with anticipation, heavy with the unseen weight of questions no longer content to rest unspoken. The Ouija board, laid upon a table like an ancient parchment etched with cryptic glyphs, may appear to the casual observer as little more than a parlor game, a relic of Victorian spiritualism, a conversation piece. Yet beneath its alphabetic simplicity lies an unresolved tension, a shimmer of potential that draws the curious, the grieving, the skeptical, and the daring alike. What is this board, truly? A bridge or a trick? A channel or a toy? That question is more than academic, it is existential. It pierces through the thin veneer of our cultural certainty and into the deeper mythos of human longing, the urge to connect beyond the membrane of the scene, to prove that consciousness is not confined to flesh or clockwork time. Whether it sits under candlelight in a darkened room or rests dusty in a thrift store corner, the Ouija board represents a mythic threshold we have never quite closed, no matter how loudly science declares the door shut. The modern age has tried, again and again, to domesticate the wild forces that once commanded reverence and fear. We have caged gods in psychology, imprisoned ghosts in folklore, and mapped the soul as circuitry. Yet the Ouija persists, mocked, feared, misunderstood. It persists because it resonates with something older than reason and deeper than belief. Like a mirror in a dream that reflects more than a face, the board seems to shimmer with the possibility that there is a second world just beneath the surface of this one, a world that listens back when spoken to. It is easy to scoff. One may say the board is nothing more than cardboard and ink, its messages conjured by the unconscious nudging of human fingers like a magician's illusion, sustained by expectation and micro-movements. Indeed, the ideomotor effect offers a tidy explanation, wrapping the phenomenon in the sterile bow of neuroscience. But that explanation, while useful, is hardly complete. For even if the messages emerge from within the psyche, who is to say the unconscious itself is not a doorway? Who is to say that when the planchette glides to spell "I am here," it is not the voice of a deeper self, a shadow ancestor, or a fragment of the divine cloaked in archetype? This board, this so-called toy, opens a paradox. It exists at the intersection of the carnival and the cathedral. It is sold at toy stores and whispered about in hushed tones. Some approach it seeking lost loved ones, others to provoke a thrill, and still others to mock its supposed absurdity. But intention is no mere garnish in spiritual matters. It is architecture. The board reflects what is brought to it. A game played in jest may echo with laughter and gibberish. But a question asked in mourning, or in genuine reverence, may just open a corridor far older than language. History offers its own testimony. The Ouija board emerged not merely from novelty, but from a time of cultural rupture, the 19th century, an era of seances and spiritual awakenings, when many grieved the loss of sons and husbands to war and plague. It was then, in that aching void, that the board found its voice. It became a kind of psychic technology, a tool not just of connection, but of survival. To speak to the dead was not entertainment, it was necessity. It was defiance against the tyranny of death's silence. And yet today, that silence returns not as fear, but as dismissal. We live in a world that has trained us to distrust the unprovable. We crave data, not divination. And still, despite the ridicule, the board endures. It endures because it occupies a liminal space in the human soul, the place where mystery is not a threat, but a sacred invitation. The board is both relic and ritual, both symbol and tool. It is a theater where we perform our deepest yearning, to know that we are not alone, to explore whether the Ouija board is a vessel of genuine communion or simply a reflection of our own mental projections, is to walk a razor's edge between metaphysics and materialism. It is to ask not just what the board does, but what we are, what parts of us lie dormant, what ancient instincts are still alive beneath our digital exteriors. It is to wonder whether the self ends at the skin, or whether we are porous beings in constant dialogue with a larger, stranger cosmos. This inquiry is not about defending belief or debunking myth. It is about standing at the crossroads of the visible and the invisible and listening. It is about wondering, with a child's awe and a mystic's humility, whether the board we place our hands upon is not just a board, but a mirror, a gateway, a test. And so, before we move deeper into this journey, before we unravel its themes, examine its symbols, and confront its real-world echoes, pause with me here. In this moment, imagine the planchette gently trembling beneath your fingers, the board whispering in a language half forgotten, a question rising from your chest like a soft flame. Now ask yourself, to gaze into the heart of the Ouija board is to look not merely into a mystical object, but into a phenomenon that rests delicately between two worlds, the interior and the exterior, the conscious and the unconscious, the realm of the mundane and the architecture of the sacred. It exists not in a vacuum, but as a condensation of many deeper truths about the human condition, and it draws its strength not from its design, but from its entanglement with the very core of our yearning. Like a prism that refracts the invisible into color, the Ouija board refracts the unseen forces of our psyche, our intentions, and perhaps something beyond. At its essence, the board operates as a liminal instrument. Not unlike a key left under a doormat, it invites the participant to lift the veil, however briefly, between what is known and what is sensed. The alphabet and numbers that arc across its surface form a cipher not only of language, but of longing. We press our fingertips to the planchette, and in doing so we perform a symbolic act. We reach outward and inward in the same breath. We dare to translate the formless into form. But how do we make sense of this act? Is it merely unconscious ideation, shaped by psychological suggestion and subtle physical nudges? Perhaps. And yet, even if that were entirely true, it would not diminish the mystery. It would deepen it. For what is the unconscious, if not the repository of myth, memory, and meaning too vast to be named? When we say the board spells what we want it to spell, or reveals what we fear or what we suspect, we may actually be saying that it draws from a reservoir far deeper than conscious intention, an ancient river winding beneath the landscape of thought. Here, then, emerges the first great theme, the porous nature of self. We are not sealed containers, we are thresholds, and the Ouija board, in its crude simplicity, calls attention to that permeability. It reveals that we are not solitary creatures walled in by rationality, but conduits open to forces, psychic, spiritual, ancestral, or imagined, that shape our experience whether we acknowledge them or not. The planchette's movement is not always the whisper of ghosts. Sometimes it is the ghost of memory, trauma, intuition, or hope. Another fundamental truth rises from this interaction. Intention is invocation. What we bring to the board shapes what the board brings to us. Just as ritual magic teaches that the tool is nothing without the focused will, the Ouija board becomes charged through attention and belief. It becomes what it is perceived to be. A skeptic sees coincidence, a believer sees spirit, a child sees magic, a cynic sees nonsense, and each, in their way, may be correct, because the board does not just deliver answers. It reflects the architecture of belief itself. It mirrors back not merely messages, but the soul's posture. This leads us to the slippery dance between illusion and authenticity. Is the board a theatrical expression of inner thought masquerading as spirit communication? Or is it, perhaps, a genuine vessel through which the veil thins? The answer may be both. In the same way that a dream can both symbolize and reveal, or that a poem can lie and still tell the truth, the board may deceive and illuminate simultaneously. It is not merely a yes or no oracle, but a stage on which our deepest archetypes perform, wearing the masks of ancestors, fears, angels, or imposters. Carl Jung might argue that the board channels not ghosts but archetypes, autonomous fragments of the collective unconscious. Others might claim that it opens portals best left unopened. The common thread is this: the board is an amplifier. It is not neutral. It vibrates with the emotional frequency of its participants. When approached with reverence, it can serve as a vessel of profound insight or healing. When approached carelessly or provocatively, it can stir psychological disturbance or projection. Like a mirror handed to a dreamwalker, it reveals only what one is ready or not ready to confront. Underlying all of this is the gravitational pull of connection. Whether we interpret the movement of the planchette as spirit communication, unconscious revelation, or a blend of both, the central desire remains the same: to connect with a loved one who has passed, with a larger spiritual order, with a hidden part of the self. The board becomes a surrogate for the unsayable. In the absence of proof, it offers contact. In the silence of death, it offers speech. In the face of existential aloneness, it offers the illusion, or reality, of company. But connection comes with cost. It demands vulnerability. It asks us to believe that there is meaning in the message. And when the board does spell out something eerily specific, or uncannily accurate, or emotionally piercing, we are left trembling before the mystery. Was that me? Was that someone? Was that something? Such moments pierce the rational mind like a needle slipping between ribs, and once pierced, the soul cannot retreat to its former dimensions. We are changed, not necessarily in belief, but in awareness. The cosmos feels more alive, less static, more breathing. Thus, the Ouija board invites not merely communication, but initiation. It is a symbolic rite, performed with fingers on wood and breath held still. It asks its users to suspend disbelief and ask sincerely. In doing so, they perform the most ancient act of all, asking the universe if it speaks back. And so we find ourselves standing between pillars. On one side, materialism and rationalism; on the other, mysticism and myth. The Ouija board sits not in allegiance to either, but as a bridge between them. It neither proves nor disproves, but dares the participant to listen harder, feel deeper, and reflect on what they truly seek when they ask the board a question. The answer is rarely just the letters that appear. It is the transformation that takes place in the asking. There is a story told, not in any book or scripture, but in the spaces between dreams. It is the tale of a child who finds an old board in her grandmother's attic, tucked away beneath moth-bitten lace and the scent of cedar. The board is smooth, stained by time, its letters faded like the names of forgotten saints. With a trembling hand, the child touches the planchette and asks a question she does not know how to shape into words. Something not spoken but felt, like grief before the tears. And in the dim hush of dusk, the planchette stirs, tracing out not an answer, but a feeling, a presence, a whisper in the blood. She doesn't remember what was said, only that something inside her awakened and never quite went back to sleep. This is the Ouija board. As myth, not as artifact or novelty, but as an archetypal symbol, a story that humanity tells itself again and again through different forms. The board becomes not a toy, but a mirror, a threshold, a burning bush whispering in unknown tongues. It becomes the modern descendant of the oracle at Delphi, the shaman's trance, the Sibyl's riddle. Beneath the veneer of letters and yes-no simplicity lies a symbolic tapestry that stretches back to the first time a human knelt by fire and asked the stars if they had meaning. The planchette itself is a compass of the soul, small, unassuming, yet pregnant with potential. It glides not merely across wood, but across the buried terrain of psyche and spirit. Like a divining rod, it points not only to messages, but to the act of seeking. To touch it is to accept the terms of the ancient contract. That answers come not as we expect them, but as they choose. It is this sacred unpredictability that makes the Ouija board both powerful and dangerous, because what it reveals is not always what we want to know, but what we need to confront. In symbolic language, the board represents the gate, and the planchette is the key. But what lies beyond the gate is not necessarily heaven or hell, it is mystery itself. A vast liminal field teeming with archetypes, echoes, and riddles wrapped in the garments of spirit. The messages may be disjointed, erratic, nonsensical, but like dreams, they demand interpretation. They resist linear thought and demand symbolic literacy. A response that spells out "I see you" might be paranoia to one, or divine affirmation to another. In this ambiguity lies both the beauty and peril of the board. It does not offer fixed meanings, but invitations to self-inquiry. Take, for instance, the countless tales of people contacting someone, or something, that offers precise knowledge, eerie timing, or emotional depth. Perhaps it is a spirit, perhaps an emanation of their own higher mind, perhaps both. The symbol here is clear. We are not as alone as we pretend to be. The veil, though thin, is real. And something watches, something responds. Whether it be the ancestors, or the cosmos, or the buried whisperings of our own soul, we are in dialogue, even in silence. There is also the darker tale, one often told with candlelight and goosebumps. A group of teens mock the board, laughing as they ask absurd questions. They summon a name, perhaps Zozo, perhaps something else, and the answers grow disturbing, even malevolent. The planchette moves faster. The air thickens. Laughter gives way to unease. What follows may be real, imagined, or psychological unraveling. But again, symbolism takes the lead. The board punishes irreverence not because it is evil, but because it reflects the energy brought to it. The sacred mocked becomes the shadow. The unearned key opens the wrong door. This duality echoes ancient myths. Prometheus steals fire from the gods and gives it to man, an act both illuminating and damning. The Ouija board too offers fire, the fire of knowledge, the fire of connection, the fire of self. But it burns indiscriminately. It warms the wise and scorches the reckless, not because it is cursed, but because mystery is not meant to be wielded without reverence. The symbolic message is consistent across cultures. That which grants access to other realms must be approached with humility, not hubris. There is also the recurring theme of possession, a word that conjures horror and hysteria, but which symbolically simply means surrender. Something takes over. Something speaks through us. But again, possession need not be demonic. It can be divine. When an artist loses herself in the painting, when a writer becomes a channel for the story that seems to write itself, when a prophet hears the voice of God, these too are possessions. The board amplifies this ancient concept. It is a symbolic enactment of surrender. I will let something else guide my hand. Whether that something is spirit or shadow depends entirely on the soul in question. One of the most haunting symbolic stories is not about horror, but healing. A woman uses the board to reach a sister who died suddenly. The messages are cryptic, fragmented, but they echo with a warmth she hadn't felt since the funeral. Over time, the board becomes a kind of altar, a ritual of remembrance. She weeps, not because she believes the sister is really there, but because something in her is finally allowed to grieve out loud. The Ouija board, in this light, becomes less a medium of spirits and more a medium of release. A threshold not just between worlds, but between suppression and expression. Spirit communication becomes self-communication. Thus, the symbolic narratives surrounding the Ouija board are not about literal ghosts or disembodied voices alone. They are about the human need to believe that something listens. They are about mystery as medicine. They are about archetypes that teach, challenge, or disturb us so that we might wake up to the deeper currents flowing beneath our mundane lives. They are about language, both the written word and the unspoken feeling, that bridges our isolation. The board asks questions as much as it answers them. It is a silent teacher, a metaphor in motion, a canvas upon which the psyche projects its deepest inquiries. And so whether it is a spiritual technology, a psychological tool, or a mythological stage, it holds value, not in what it is, but in what it evokes. What use is a mystic mirror if it cannot show us our own face more clearly? What good is a whisper from the other side if it doesn't ripple into this side? Into the trembling choreography of our everyday steps, our coffee-stained mornings, our flickering screens, and sleepless nights? The Ouija board, for all its ghostly associations and spiritual intrigue, ultimately demands a reckoning not with the dead, but with the living, with how we live, how we listen, and how we carry the invisible through the visible world. To use the board, one must first gather. Gather people, gather energy, gather intention. In this way, the ritual begins long before the fingers touch the planchette. And herein lies the first real-world echo, the importance of intentional space. Whether you're summoning spirits or simply setting a table for conversation, intention shapes outcome. The board teaches, in its own strange syntax, that nothing sacred comes without preparation. Lighting candles may not bring forth a spirit, but it may bring forth focus, stillness, presence. And those qualities, rare in a distracted age, are portals themselves. In this sense, the board is less about contacting spirits and more about contacting depth. It slows us down. It tunes us in. In a world of rapid data and shallow interaction, it demands a different pace, a ritualized awareness. The lesson is subtle, but profound. What we call supernatural may simply be natural depth, made unfamiliar by our constant drift toward surface living. Then comes the act itself, the question. This is not small talk. One does not ask a Ouija board what to wear tomorrow. Even those who treat it as a game often find themselves asking something heavier than expected. Where is she now? What is my purpose? Is there anything beyond this? These are not game night questions. They are primal cries, and that is no accident. The board, whether by psychological prompting or something more, pulls from the deep. It bypasses triviality. It opens a space in which truth-seeking becomes ritual, a space that we are often starved for in secular modernity. The power of the Ouija board in daily life, then, is not in its ghostly drama, but in its symbolic honesty. It reminds us that we are creatures of longing, beings who ache for connection beyond the obvious. Whether we believe in spirits or not, the mere act of asking unseen forces for guidance reveals a truth we often hide, that we are not satisfied with what we see. We crave more meaning, more connection, more presence, and that craving, when honored, becomes the seed of transformation. There are also practical psychological insights the board reveals. When messages arise from it, be they nonsensical, profound, or haunting, what we are often witnessing is the subconscious made legible. Fears we haven't named, hopes we barely dare to hope, memories we've entombed in the attic of the mind. In this way, the Ouija board can become a therapeutic tool if used wisely. Not therapy in the clinical sense, but a ceremony of self-exposure. It is not unlike journaling or dream interpretation. One listens for the symbolic, not the literal. One reads between the lines, not just on them. But just as fire warms and burns, the board carries warnings. Not because it is inherently evil, but because it strips away filters. It doesn't provide protection. You do. The clarity of one's internal state, the steadiness of one's intention, the maturity of one's spirit. These are the true boundaries in such work. A teenager using the board for kicks and giggles may stumble into emotional territory they are ill-prepared to navigate. An adult consumed by grief may project their own desperation into the planchette's drift. The board magnifies, and magnification without discernment is always risky. Thus, practical integration means we must develop spiritual hygiene. Just as one would wash hands after a ritual of touch, or clear energy after emotional labor, one must also close the space that the board opens. This can be as simple as thanking whatever forces, psychological or spiritual, that were present, and stating clearly, "This session is ended." It may seem superstitious to the modern mind, but the psyche listens to ritual. Closure matters. Otherwise, we leave psychic doors swinging open in the wind and wonder why we feel disturbed days later. In more grounded terms, the board reminds us of something our culture often forgets: that not every answer comes instantly or in plain language. The planchette spells slowly. It stutters. It evades, like life. And if we are to learn from it, we must learn to wait, to decipher, to sit with ambiguity. This is a practice worth carrying into everything, from how we navigate relationships to how we interpret dreams to how we ask life's big questions. Rarely do we get straight lines. Often we get hints, threads, fragments. The board trains us to follow these with patience, not panic. And finally, perhaps the most striking real-world implication: the Ouija board forces us to take language seriously again. In a world saturated with words, from hashtags to headlines, we grow numb to language. But the board re-enchants language. Each letter must be spelled out, slowly, deliberately, often requiring communal effort and interpretation. This transforms words from disposable into sacred symbols again. We remember that meaning is fragile, that messages are precious, that listening requires attention, not just ears. So whether you believe the board connects to spirits or simply to parts of yourself long hidden, its practical power lies in how it changes the texture of attention. It invites a way of being that is slower, more reverent, more attuned. It is a rehearsal for sacred listening, in a world that too often forgets how to hear. In the end, it may not matter what moves the planchette. Perhaps it is a whisper from the other side, filtered through the trembling hands of the bereaved. Perhaps it is the unconscious mind, rising like steam from the deep wells of unspoken thought, given form only when the soul dares to ask aloud. Or perhaps, just perhaps, it is both. A meeting place, a doorway where inner and outer realms merge, where the seen and the unseen shake hands, in a language older than time and more intimate than belief. The Ouija board, in all its mystery and controversy, is not the thing we've been taught to fear or mock. It is not simply a game, nor merely a spiritual tool. It is a mirror, one we hesitate to gaze into because it reflects more than ghosts. It reflects possibility. That there may be more to this life than circuitry and bones. That there may be listening in the silence. That the self is not sealed but porous, like a shell through which the ocean speaks in pulses and echoes. If this board has taught us anything across the journey of these pages, it is this: you are always in conversation with something. Be it memory, mystery, soul, or spirit, you are never alone in the truest sense. The very act of questioning, of reaching out, implies a response waiting to return. It is the sacred call and response of existence, one in which the universe often answers with riddles, and the key is not found in certainty, but in surrender. Let us not forget that the Ouija board emerged in a time when loss choked the world: war, disease, absence. And in that void, people reached out. Not because they were naive, but because they were human. Grief asks questions science cannot always answer. Love continues after breath ends. The board did not promise salvation. It promised contact. It gave structure to the chaos of longing, shape to the formless ache. And whether those responses came from beyond the veil or deep within the psyche, they came, and they changed the questioners. This, then, is your invitation to look at the board not with fear but with discernment, not with superstition but with sacred curiosity. The board, like life, will not always give you straight answers. It may confuse you, frighten you, surprise you. But so does the mirror, so does the night sky, so does love. And perhaps the most radical act we can take in the modern world is to pause, truly pause, and listen. To step back from the sterile hum of algorithmic certainty, to set our fingertips upon something unknown, and to ask, what is speaking through me that I have not yet dared to hear? The answer may not come in words. It may not come from the board. It may come later, as a dream, a coincidence, a sudden clarity in the middle of an ordinary afternoon. But it will come, because the universe cannot help but echo those who dare to ask sincerely. There is one final message, and it does not need a planchette to spell it out. You are the board. You are the question. You are the channel, the echo, the silence, and the sound. What you seek is not elsewhere. It is amplified through ritual, not created by it. The board was never the source. It was always the signal booster. The real frequency is already humming in your bones. So go forward, not with fear, but with awareness. Light candles not to conjure shadows, but to illuminate the parts of yourself that are still waiting to speak. Ask boldly. Interpret slowly. Trust the pauses. Honor the ambiguity. And know this, whether the planchette moves or not, something is listening. Something within and beyond you. Poised between the lines of every question you've ever asked in the dark. The veil is thinner than you think, and sometimes it is your own breath that stirs it.